right. I'm just going to enjoy life.
Right, right. It's supposed to be, I think, upwards of 93 by the time we get to Friday.
What?
So, yeah, the temperature is certainly kicking up there. You need to look at change in geography there.
Oh, kidding, eh? I mean, well, I keep having all these people on that are in the southern climes, and it's just hoping to make everybody else in Canada feel better, right? But
Right.
first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to come on, buddy. I mean, I just like, it's really funny. You know, we meet each other for first time last PGA show. We have dinner together. I get to sit beside you. And the really wild thing about this is I didn't realize, and I'm not blowing smoke here. I didn't realize just how much of a freaking rock star you are. We only knew each other in kind of like the social media game, right? And it's like,
Right.
but getting to know you a bit more, doing some funny Christmas jingles, and then watching you just evolve and watching how you've done so much in such a short period of time is incredibly inspiring for one, because I think I'm always like, I got to get stuff done, and I see somebody do it, and I got to go do it, right? And
Right.
I I just am floored with the amount of stuff that you have accomplished in a very short period of time. So kudos to you, my dear. You are
Thank you.
an absolute amazing woman, amazing professional on so many different ways, and I'm so happy to have people listen and experience and hear just some of the amazing stuff that you do and how you've gotten to where you are. So thank you very
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. I love your COVID chats and the lineup that you've got going on, and I'm honored to be a part of some of these amazing people that you're interviewing. And the more that I'm watching, the more I get to learn about you. So it's kind of been a beneficial
cool.
experience for me too. Yeah,
Yeah,
excited to
as you
chat.
see, I've got We the North, and I got my Raptors, shirt on. And it's like, it's supposed to be right in the playoff time right now, and unfortunately, we got zero.
I know.
I mean, Netflix last night, I'm trying to watch the Michael Jordan story, and it gets like 20 seconds into it and shuts down. I actually have Netflix. I tweet it out, and Netflix gets back to me on Twitter and says, can you email us and let us know what's going on? And I was like, yeah, it's not working. So
Wow.
I was severely disappointed because I needed some good MJ last night. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this young woman below is Alison Curdt. Currt Golf. She lives in Los Angeles. She is director of instruction at her golf course, which I cannot remember what it is.
Wood Ranch Golf Club.
Thank you.
Right.
And the really cool thing about this woman is I don't know much more that she's accomplished that anybody else has in, like I said, a very short period of time. She has a master LPGA professional, a master PGA professional. She has played in how many PGA championships?
Six going on my number seven.
Not 7 PGA championships, as well. Played at Florida State. She was awarded Player of the Year in 2016 in the Southern Cal PGA, and she just was awarded by, I think, the same Southern Cal PGA as Professional of the Year. Correct?
Yes.
Wow. Now, the icing on the cake of this whole thing is you're a practicing psychologist. You have your doctorate in psychology, and you actually have a practice in sports psychology. Like, what else do you want? Okay, what else can you do?
Well, number one, I want to attack this social media game. This is like a hard thing. That's where you and I really connected on. But no, in all seriousness, with playing, teaching, and psychology, those are kind of my three areas that I really devote my life. There's still a lot more that I'd like to achieve and accomplish, not only on a playing field, but certainly teaching and being able to share good information with the masses to help people play better golf, and then to continue to be an innovator in the field of psychology and use treatments and protocols that really help athletes perform their best. So there's
Well,
still a lot more to accomplish.
that really interests me, actually, a little bit of, like when I was doing my diligence over the last couple of days, because, digging in a little bit more into who you are.
Mhm.
Because I needed to know a little bit more. It was really an interesting point to find your practice about sports psychology. So I'd love to get into that a little bit later. But, basically, like I said, you have more accolades than 90% of us other golf professionals. And I mean, what was the catalyst here? What was the catalyst to go for master PGA professional, master LPGA, and now you've got your doctorate in psychology? Like, what was the motivation here?
Well, you know that our industry is so heavily populated. We've got in the US 28,000 PGA members. When you look at globally, how many coaches and teachers are there? And it's a big swimming pool. And so in order to separate myself from the masses, I was taught very early on to find your niche and then work up that ladder as best as you can to get to the top. And I heard this great speech many years ago. It was actually by the LPGA president at the time, Dana Rader, who talked about kind of our population, sort of like in a pyramid, and where people fit in that pyramid. And the bottom is really heavily congested. That's kind of where everyone hangs out. But if you look at this pyramid, there's a ton of room at the top, which means like being the top 5%. And so I really took that to heart and tried to figure out ways where I could move myself into that top 5% to be my best in order to help other people be their best. So when I went back to school to start studying psychology, part of it was a little bit of, if I'm going to help professional players, does a master's degree give me as much education as I could if I wanted to help a professional player? And I said, no, it has to be a doctorate. So that's kind of where the education went in terms of academics. So I attained my doctorate. But in terms of PGA and being able to become a certified professional, specialized professional, and a master, I figured, why not? Why not do it? I had to do a little bit of waiting with the LPGA because their curriculum is different in terms of times being a member. And I decided, well, if I'm a master PGA professional, why not be an LPGA master professional and continue to separate myself even more? So that's always been kind of my motive, is to be in that top 5%. And why not make that top 5% the top 1%? Be the only one. Why not be the only one in doing what you do? And so that's
Well,
kind of been the
you are.
motivation.
You know,
I am,
I
yeah.
really think you are. I mean, this is the really cool part about it. And you brought up Dana Rader, and the really cool thing about Dana Rader is that she was the spark plug for my very good friend Jason Sutton, the golf guru. He worked for her, and she got him, really helped him hone his craft to and into the person that he is today. And he actually has had her on his podcast this week. So it's really kind of funny that you reference her speech and how much of a leader she was for the LPGA as well as for other PGA professionals, right? And I mean, that's a really cool story because, to always be the best and try to get out of this, get up there to the top, 5% and really separate yourself. That's a differentiator. And that's the amazing part about it. I mean, like I said, no one else does what you do. And I'm floored because one of the things is, like, you were a decent player in college. I would say, not horrible, but you weren't like breaking par every time.
Right.
Right. But you're like a way better player now.
It's interesting. When I played for Florida State, and I was a two-time academic All-American, so it shows that I played well enough and studied well enough to at least get that nice credential. I was playing against the best of the best. I mean, being at a top 25 school, we were seeing Duke every week. And at the time, Duke was the number one school in the country. And you're playing against some of the girls that are still on LPGA tour. The fields seemed like a little mini LPGA that we played against. So coming from Missouri, playing for Florida State, I was sort of like this small fish jumping into a big pond. So you're right, I didn't play as well as I would have loved to have played. But then I think what happened in terms of turning professional and being a PGA member and getting an opportunity to play in a lot of the section events and then having the opportunity to play in the LPGA majors that I have,
Yeah.
I think part of it is as I've gotten wiser in terms of how to practice, I certainly know much more about the golf swing than I did. I didn't have really the resources in college that a lot of the students have now, where you're working on flight scope monitors or TrackMan. You have all the technology. I mean, V1 was just starting to gain some speed when I was in college. If you had to take a slow motion video, it was like get the camcorder out and press
Yeah.
slow mo
The
and
big
go
boxes,
frame by
they were like
frame.
big boxes, right? It was like,
Oh yeah.
right? There were two boxes that you clipped together, and yeah, that was
It was,
like,
yeah, feedback was
we're kind
not
of dating ourselves a little bit here, but yes, I understand.
just a little bit. I was like right on the fine line between when all the cool stuff came out. So I've seen the best of both worlds. But I think that my knowledge has improved, certainly control of the equipment and being able to get customized equipment much more accessible. instead of just buying something off of the rack. So there's been a lot of advantages post college that I think has helped me become a better player.
That's really cool. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was who has, and you mentioned somebody earlier today when we were texting, but who have been some of the people that you sought out to help you become a better player, and how much have you stolen from them to help you be a better coach?
So it's interesting. When I was a junior going through college, I really had just one coach, and that was the club pro in St. Louis that my family was a member at. Brian Main was his name. So kudos to the PGA member. But then post college, I really just kind of like tried to figure it out myself. And then after playing in a couple of KPMGs, which for the LPGA is their tour championship, if you
Right.
will, I didn't perform anywhere near the level that I wanted to. And so many years ago, I sought out some help from Brady Riggs, and he consulted and helped with my swing. And as of most recently, been working a little bit with Dana Dahlquist down in Long Beach.
Very,
And I think both of them have helped me look at the golf swing from a completely different way. It's certainly influenced my teaching a little bit, but I think what maybe young instructors do, not someone seasoned like you and I, is they'll take a lesson and then they start teaching everybody their lesson.
right.
And I'm more like I take that information, that's for me specifically how to help me hit the golf ball better. But it might open up some doors to say, oh, I think I want to study a little bit more of like, let's say ground reaction forces, or I think I want to study a little bit more on some MORAD system. That's where it's kind of opened up my mind. But for me personally, I have a lot of difficulty helping myself improve. So I love that outside perspective. I love going to someone and having them tell me, provided it fits in line with my structure, this is what you need to do to get better. So I'm very coachable in that
I was
aspect.
gonna say it takes a lot of as we become professionals, the ego kind of gets in the way. You think you know everything and all that stuff, but we're always so hard to coach ourselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, it takes a really big person to be able to say, you know what, I do better when someone's teaching me. And I mean, you're consulting two of the best people that I would, out there in Cali. I mean, you've got a gaggle of people to look at. And I mean, that's really cool that you have access to those two guys who are, really, really top shelf coaches. Um, so I want to dive into a little bit of this mental game of yours that you've got going with the Currt performance, therapy. And in this, you reference something called EMDR, and it's to help athletes to get through a traumatic performance altering experience. Can you help us understand how EDMR is a benefit to the athlete who may be really struggling?
Definitely. So here's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it from a golf perspective. So you're playing golf, something happens on the golf course that really upsets you or troubles you. Let's say you have a big number, you score 12. Let's say you're Jordan Spieth and you hit 3 or 4 golf balls in the water. Something happens to you that's really unsettling. That becomes some sort of a memory. We can all think back in our history of times
Yeah.
on the golf course that something embarrassing, something shameful, something disappointing happened. What happens with our brain in terms of the memory consolidation process is if that memory and that incident is disturbing enough, oftentimes your brain doesn't process it fully. So it becomes quote unquote stuck in your memory. And when you think about that troubling incident, you can sort of relive it like a PTSD type experience in the present day. So if you think back to maybe something that happened 10 years ago on the golf course, you might relive the feelings of what happened. You might relive the experience in your body, maybe the pit in your stomach or the tension in your jaw. And your brain starts to make interpretations about what happened during that event, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not a great player, I suck, I'm worthless. And so in your brain, you now have this memory of this really troubling event. You have associations that you've paired with it, and your brain's not consolidating that memory because it's so emotionally charged. What EMDR does, and what it stands for, is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's a technique that is used for, it started out being used for PTSD. So like war veterans,
Oh, really?
people that have experienced traumatic events. In fact, all of us right now, due to COVID-19, we're all going through a trauma of some effect.
We are
Um,
absolutely. I would totally agree with you. I mean, to, you know, me in basketball and also in golf, I've had those experiences that, they essentially with stick. I would say it's almost like I remember Ian Baker Finch, right? He tried to redo his swing. He stands up at the first hole at St. Andrews and hooks it out of bounds across the 18th hole. And he's like traumatized and he can't get this out of his head. There's a prime example of somebody who needs to get his brain rewired. So how does this work?
So when you have the golfer, client, patient pull up that traumatic incident, you go through a certain protocol about determining what's like the worst part of the experience. You find where you're storing it in your body and what are some of the negative beliefs that you have about yourself regarding that incident. And then as you're working with a therapist, they'll move your eyes back and forth. So like if I hold my fingers up and I move it across the screen, you as the client would be following my fingers. And it basically recreates what happens when you sleep. When you go into REM sleep, your eyes will move back and forth underneath your eyelids, and your brain is taking all the day's information and it's filing it in its different places. So in a waking state, when we take an emotionally charged memory, such as, missing a free throw to win the game or hooking it out of bounds, we're taking that emotionally charged event, and in a safe environment with a therapist, we're basically desensitizing and decharging that memory. And so I've worked with some professional players that have had some really debilitating incidents happen. And in little as one session, they have felt so much better. Their distress has decreased, their anxiety has decreased based upon that particular memory with EMDR. So it's fast, it's effective. By the World Health Organization, it's prescribed as one of the #1 treatments for PTSD. So I basically have taken that and adapted it to golfers and athletes to help them overcome some of those traumatic memories so they're not triggered when they're trying to perform in present day.
Wow. I mean, you know what? That's amazing. I think that would be a huge opportunity for some kids or some people that have really, want to get to the highest level of golf and, just can't push through because they're hanging on to these things that are just traumatize them. And they don't, do you find that it's something that you have to draw out of them, or it's very apparent to them that this is the issue?
It can go both ways. I mean, there's some people that I've talked to that they'll say, oh, I know that this experience that happened, this is one of the areas that I need to work on. Like in my own trauma history, we all have a history of trauma. When I think back to some of the biggest failures or the most charging memories for me, I think back to my high school state championship when I was a senior, was leading the championship until the last hole, made a double bogey. Next thing you know, I'm runner up. So that's something that I know in my history would be an area that I would want to improve on. Some players know that. Other players, what we do through questioning is we kind of pick the present day symptoms, and then we start doing a reflection back, a float back technique, if you will, looking at different times in their lives when they might have felt this way, looking for either the first time that they felt that way or the worst time that they felt that way. So there's some protocols that we use in order to pull out some of the memories if a client doesn't know what their root source is.
That's really cool. Wow, I'd never heard about it before. And when I saw it, when I was looking at your website and all this stuff and digging a little bit more, I was like, wow, thank you for giving us the Coles Notes version of that, Cliff Notes
You got it.
of that, because it's really helpful to understand that. So that's a really great part about that and how much you can benefit from something that seems so very minor but has such a major effect on people. So really, really cool. All right. A little bit of a fun question here. So I got the Golf Channel is remaking The Legend of Bagger Vance, but they're calling it The Legend of Alison Curdt. And the reason is because you have achieved so much compared to everybody else. So I want to know, what would The Legend of Alison Curdt be renowned for, and what would the story be about? So to inspire young women to follow in your footsteps.
Definitely, or just inspire any young golfer to follow in my footsteps. I would say that legend would say that I have looked at different areas in the golf industry that are untapped and have brought them to a recognition to our industry. So, for example, the mental game is talked about a lot, but we don't talk about athletic traumas a lot. We don't talk about the negative parts where we feel like we're ashamed or disappointed or we feel failure. I think that legend would also say kind of a trailblazer in terms of being the first in something. So to be the first dual master professional in the PGA and the LPGA in instruction takes some trailblazing in that. And it's certainly not easy. It's not always fun. And sometimes you kind of have to kick and claw your way to get there, but it shows resilience and grit. So hopefully what that legend would say is be comfortable with the uncomfortableness of trying to achieve because it's not a linear path. Oftentimes it's faced with a lot of pushback, and sometimes you get 6 no's before you get 1 yes. And hopefully it would just encourage people to persevere and be resilient to make sure that they can accomplish whatever they have their mind set on.
Well, that's an awesome answer. I think that legend would be amazing to follow. And again, you're already setting that tone of that history. And I mean, being the first to ever have that accomplishment. So you and I, we kind of got to know each other through a social media group and so on and so forth. Now, my good friend here, she's actually on this. I think she's still here. Carrie Moffat. She's the coach of the UBC Women's Thunderbird golf team. They won the NAIA championship this past year.
Oh, wow.
An amazing team. And I mean, one of the things I love about Carrie is how she keeps her girls just so light and airy and bubbly and very focused and all that stuff, right? And it's a really cool thing. Now, you know, social media is pretty daunting, right? One of the things I like about what Carrie says is because we were at the PGA show and I got her to meet Trillian Rose. Now, the reason she said to me, "Do you want to meet Trillian Rose?" and this is kind of a funny statement. She goes, "Well, Trill's done it because she's kept her clothes on." And it's kind of a funny statement, right? I really like it because I think it's like, yes, you know what? Women like yourself, women like Trill, you know, Carrie, right? You guys are accomplishing, you know, getting yourselves known, getting yourselves out there, but it's really hard. So are there any tips that you could do or give us for female professionals in social media that might be helpful for them to be better at what they're doing?
Definitely. You've already alluded to all the challenges of social media. I mean, certainly we could all do what we do in bathing suits and probably get more followers and more traction. And we've actually tested that before, haven't
We
we,
have,
Doug?
yes.
But I think I take some advice really from if you follow Gary Vee on
Yeah.
Instagram. He
Very cool.
always
Yeah,
he
yeah.
talks about the content. Like if you forget about the end goal of trying to get followers, and if you focus more on the goal of, I want to give out information that's going to help people be better, then I think that law of attraction will make you more seen, more noticeable. My problem with social media is that it is so vain. So depending on how you look, what you're wearing, whether you're thin or not thin, who you're branded by can oftentimes dictate a lot of that following. So if you kind of take your own approach and say, forget about what the end game is of getting more followers, I want to focus on sharing information on college recruiting, sharing information about the mental game, sharing information about what I'm doing with my students to help them be better. I think that will start to slowly trickle out to the type of audience that you want, rather than just an audience to have an audience. That's taken a little bit of time for me to adjust to, and my growth has been super slow. You'll notice if you look at my feed, I don't post a lot of pictures of with me with my hair down and my face and all that. I'm teaching, like I'm giving information about how I'm helping my students, or I'm showing the changes in my students. And if that doesn't get me 20,000 followers, then so be it. But the 3,000 that do follow me, hopefully they're taking away some golden nuggets that's going to make them better. And in the end, that's what ultimately makes me feel fulfilled.
Those ones that you want, the 3,000 organic
Yeah.
followers, right? Because they're following you because you're the real deal. You're putting out great stuff. You're an amazing coach, and you've got really great stuff that you tell them about. And you know what? That's so refreshing to hear, because I really find it, you know, people try to be so many different things, right? And I mean, one of the things that and this is why I've kind of gone across the board in terms of who I want to bring on COVID chats, because like there's people who are incredibly successful. I mean, Michelle Holmes has, you know, almost 20,000 followers, all that stuff, right? She's a rock star, but she hasn't gone around and tried to do that. She gets asked questions all the time, and she just does junior golf because that's what she does. And she doesn't do it wearing mini skirts and all that stuff. It's she
Right.
puts out what she does,
Right.
you know. And so my point being is, and I thank you for that answer because it's, again, very refreshing. Be true to yourself. Be good at what you do, right?
Right.
And don't sweat it. So, all right, this is the question I didn't send you. Haha.
Okay.
But all right, so I have an interesting question because I listened to this the other day and I thought it's an amazing question. As a coach, you know, it's so very often we can look at a player and we know and figure out the starting point, or we can figure out what's wrong with the player, okay, in terms of like when they're standing on their lesson tee and what they're there for, and they can tell you and verbalize it and so on and so forth. All right. But John Wooden would always start every season by having the players learn how to lace up their shoes and socks because he did it a specific way to reduce chafing and blisters. Why is that important? Because at the end of the game, when his players' feet were still fresh, everybody else's feet were hurting. They didn't know how to lace up their shoes properly or put on socks properly to avoid any problems. Those are the fundamentals. Those are the basics that we always seem to want to stay in. How much do you go back to the fundamentals with students and find there's more there than they realize when they step on your tee?
I think the fundamentals are often overlooked. We have standards for grip alignment, posture, ball position, things like that. I think if you can't get set up to the golf ball in a fashion that's going to create a playable ball flight, then you've got no chance to make a good golf swing. No chance at all. A lot of times there's great golf swings that are completely inhibited because of something that was set up at the beginning the wrong way. And I look at it kind of like a chain of dominoes. So like if you have all these dominoes kind of lined up, this first one is like the fundamentals. And if that one's knocked over, all of them are going to fall over. A lot of times a player doesn't want to work on the fundamentals. They don't want to come to the lesson tee, pay $150 and be told that their grip needs to be strengthened. Like it's not sexy, it's not cool, it's not
No, it's
fun.
not sexy. What about my wrist
Pressure
angle?
shift and
Horseplay
flexion,
pressure.
extension. Exactly, right. Like all the cool stuff that they see. But how can you do those things if you've got something that's so egregiously out of position? So I kind of take it with a grain of salt. I am more of a
No, don't freak on me.
student-centered type teacher where whatever the student wants to work on is kind of like a patient going into a doctor's office. Here's my symptoms. So whatever the student wants to work on, I'm going to help you work on them. But keep in mind that there may be some things that need to be changed before you even start motion. That is just this. And once a student understands that, they're completely on board. So it's kind of like, hey, we're going to start basketball practice, but let's check those shoes first. Let's check the socks first, make sure everything's good to go.
That's awesome. Sorry, my phone decided to go a little goofy on me there. All right, so my favorite section of the whole thing is my Fast Five. All right, so these are 5 questions that I like asking because you get really good answers to these. Okay, so do your
Okay.
best, and we'll see what happens. So you decided, on top of being a doctor, you decided to take up MMA, and you are getting ready for a fight. What's your walk-in entrance music?
Lady Gaga, Bad Romance.
Oh, good one there. I like that. Nice. Yeah, they're going to get a whoop ass. There you go. All right. What would you prefer? Jelly donut, ice cream, apple pie, chocolate cake?
Oh, out of those, it'd have to be ice cream.
Ice cream. I know why I love you. You love ice cream. All right.
But I'm actually a cake girl, but because you said chocolate cake, then it completely ruled it out. If you'd said birthday cake, sign me up.
All right. Well, okay. But in ice cream, what's your favorite flavor?
Anything with Reese's peanut butter cup.
Oh boy, do I got a story for you. So I'm down in Ohio and I'm playing Firestone and I'm actually there with my pastor. He took me to this church tournament and it's a long story. We get taken to this ice cream chain called Handles. Best ice cream I've ever had. Homemade, all that stuff. But they make an ice cream called Spouse Like a House.
Huh.
That's the name of this ice cream. Malted vanilla ice cream, peanut butter ribbon, and chocolate covered pretzels.
Huh. Okay. All
Absolutely
right.
the most amazing ice cream I ever said. Reese's Pieces, Reese's peanut butter cups would probably be, if I go to DQ, that's the blizzard of choice.
Oh,
However,
yeah.
both my kids have peanut allergies, so I can't have those in the house.
It's a
Got
damn
it.
shame. They are missing out on one of the greatest pleasures in the world.
100%, Alison. 100%. All right. So you're going to go play an episode of Shell's Wonderful World of Golf. Do you know what? Have you ever seen any episodes of those?
I never have seen one, and I actually had to Google it and I had to
Come on.
research it.
Shell, hold on.
Dude,
Wait a minute.
it
Stop.
started in 1960. My
Yeah, but
parents
hold
weren't
on.
even born yet, practically.
Iconic matches of golf lore. And, oh, I know why you missed. Oh, it's easy to understand why you don't know what it is because you've been in school your whole life.
Yeah.
Anyways, so you Googled it. All right, so Shell's Wonderful World of Golf. Who are you going to play your match against and where?
Oh, I'm actually playing the match, not watching the match?
No, you're playing somebody.
Oh gosh. Well, if I had to play somebody, I think I'd want to go all the way back to one of the greats, Babe Zaharias. And I
Oh,
think
that
I'd
would
want
be
to go
awesome.
one-on-one there.
Was.
Yeah, I played in a PGA Tour event, Olympian, helped create the LPGA.
Yes.
So one of the founding women of that. So yeah, I think that would be it.
And
And
where?
so where? Anywhere. I'm one of those players, I don't have a favorite golf course.
Oh, that's all right. That's okay.
But yeah, if you want to do Pebble Beach, that's cool. We'll go out
All
there.
right, that's cool. That'd be a good match, though. That'd be great. All
Yeah.
right. Who's Alison Curt's hero?
Oof. Gosh. I don't know if I have a hero.
Really?
Yeah.
That's all right. You're
I
gonna be
don't think I have a hero. I would say in
like
golf,
you always are.
in golf, I've really always admired Annika at her prime. I
Okay.
had a chance to meet her when I was 13, and she was just up and coming, just won the US Open. And I thought it was just really cool how she handled herself and her career. I always looked up to her career. She's always very, very evenly mannered and tempered when she played, whether things were going well or going poorly. So in terms of golf, I would say maybe she's my golf hero.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you know what? She is like you in the top percentage. In doing what they do the best, right? So that's the really cool part.
Right.
And if you were going to be what movie would Alison Curdt like to play the lead role in? So this is a little different. Normally I ask people who plays the leading role in the Alison Curdt movie, but you're going to select the movie you want to play the lead role in.
Okay, so I have an explanation on this. What I've been doing during quarantine is actually watching all the Marvel movies,
Yeah, yeah.
not how they came out, but how they're meant to be seen in the order that the story flows.
Oh, very cool.
So it's very cool. I would say I'd want to be Captain Marvel.
Ah, very cool. Very, very
Yes, I'd want to play her. Who doesn't want to be a
cool.
superhero?
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, it's really funny. Somebody said to me, I was going to be, teaming up with somebody, and they said, oh, I was going to have Scott Couts on COVID chats, and my buddy goes, oh, this is why the Avengers win. It's like, I said, wait a minute, you're referring to Scott and I as the Avengers. Okay, hold on a second. I said, okay, so Scott is Iron Man, and I'm Thor, because Scott's the smartest guy in the room, and I'm just good looking.
There you go. That'll work.
I don't have the hair. I wield a hammer. I am not.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. So this is a little bit of a testy question, and it goes to the fact that over the last few years, all right, the women's movement, based on with the Harvey Weinstein and all the things that have gone on with regards to people that have just been completely offside and totally awful. But it's about being able to speak up. And in golf, okay, it's often been looked at as the old boys club. And, it's like, hey, this is the way it is. Hey, we're not going to have anything change. But lo and behold, the president of the PGA is a woman, Susie Whaley. Do you think this is a little bit of a flash in the pan? Or do you think her appointment as the president of the PGA of America, is something that can help build a greater impression, a greater reach for women in this game?
Hands down, it already has. I mean, it's taken forever to get strong women in leadership. And if you actually look at the amount of female section presidents and those that are in officer positions to become section presidents in the PGA, the numbers are certainly growing. So with Susie being president, she's a mentor, she's a friend. I think the world of her. She was the captain of our USA PGA Women's Cup team. Sorry, we did beat Canada and beat everybody. She is a true inspiration, and I think she has one of the toughest jobs, but she is also one of the most amazing people to be that trailblazer.
Sure.
Because she has done it, I think that's opened the door for so many other women to get involved in governance, to get involved in positions of leadership, and she does it with such pizzazz, and she's so classy while she does it on top of it. I just really idolize her. So she is by far a
All right.
trailblazer for all of us.
Sorry, my phone's like dying, and I had to try and plug it in. So okay, she is a trailblazer. I've had the opportunity to meet her and talk to her and stuff. What is it about her that you think is going to help you and the women in the LPGA and the PGA be so much better?
It's the way that she handles tough situations. So there is, and let's just be completely honest about this, if there is a man that is trying to lay down the law, set some rules, and enforce rules, then he is looked at, and science and research has validated this, he is looked at as being a strong leader. If a woman tries to uphold and enforce rules, oftentimes she is looked at as in a negative way. So why is it that exhibiting the same quality, a man will be looked at as being strong and, okay, we'll follow him, but a woman is not looked at in that same way? And that's just our societal perceptions of men and women. What Susie does differently is she's able to lead and inspire and set good framework and enforce rules, but she does it in such a classy and neutral way that she's not looked upon as being negative. And I think what she can teach many women is how to improve their messaging, how to improve their delivery of the messaging. It's hard to be mad at somebody when they're telling you no, when it's coming with a smile and they're making a really good rational case for why, no, you can't do that. So yeah, there's an art to it. And I think she's figured out the art to it for sure.
Wow. Well, you know what? I mean, I really, and thank you for the answer, because often it's a bit of a, it's kind of a tricky situation to ask about, because I really think that women, and I know so many strong women like yourself, and I come from good stock, and my mother, she founded a shelter for women, battered women and their kids. So I understand the importance of it, and I really do believe it's so important in golf that women are, seen on the level of men, because you are contributing equally, and if not more, in certain ways, and have a connection to young women. And did you know this stat, that the health of a private golf club can be figured out based on how many young junior girls are members?
That's interesting. I can see that, but I haven't seen that research specifically.
It's actually a stat told me by my friend I think it was the American Golf Course, Club Managers did this research, and I think it says the health of a private club can be judged on how many junior girls are members, because if the junior girl's a member, mom's going to be at the club. If the boy's a member, they leave them.
Interesting. Wow.
The club is better when you have more girls at the club playing, because they all get social, right?
Right.
And for a point they're social until they get a little competitive. But the same thing happens as mom becomes a member. Mom wants to hang at the club. All these things happens. If it's boys, he's a boy, I can leave him alone. He's all guy, I'm gonna go somewhere else. And they're not necessarily doesn't happen to have the joining point. So it's a really interesting stat, because I really think that these stats are sitting in front of these guys, these people in power. How do we not realize that this is the key to success in golf and get more girls in this game?
Definitely. So this morning I was on a webinar and we were talking about junior golfers and from a woman's perspective, and a couple of stats from 1995, junior girls were only 70% of the golfer population. And now, thankfully, due to programs like PGA Junior League, the ADM model, PGA, LPGA, USGA Girls Golf, girl golfers now make up 36%
Wow.
of all golfers, which I think is really phenomenal. And in the past 30 years, just from the LPGA Girls Golf program, 800,000 girl golfers have gone through that program in 30 years, which I think is amazing. And 45 of them are currently playing on tour or the Symetra Tour.
Wow.
So we always talk about like that untapped market, but if you think about getting a girl into golf, it may not just be through professional endeavors, but just having golf in their life
Yes.
is paramount. There's so many different careers. I mean, you had coaches on this week that probably played junior golf from being a kid, college, and now they're a college coach, high school
You
coaches.
know one of them.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have to connect
Exactly.
with her.
Exactly.
So
So
there's a whole bunch of
that's a really
careers in
cool
golf.
point, because like I have probably half of my juniors are girls.
Mhm.
And the really cool part is I love it when you can turn more girls onto golf, because the really cool thing is, and I often use this, you don't get in trouble on a golf course. Like, you know what? Your phone's away, you don't have it in your hand, you're playing a game that teaches you so many life skills, and it's got a sociability to it where you have to talk to people. Essentially, you're going to be playing with other people and you have to come out and you actually have to talk to them. So I find it so amazing. So that brings me to another question. So in your junior golf, all right, how did were you like just keep yourself, were you social, or was it more of like you knew what you wanted to do and you focused on your game?
Well, when I was playing junior golf, there weren't that many girl golfers in my junior program, so I was always paired with the boys, which was fine because it was fun to have them as friends. And I would say probably not until high school did I actually start to create a social network with buddies where we'd see each other at tournaments, and then when we started to drive, we could drive to tournaments, and eventually we could start to travel. What I'm seeing our industry do now is filling that void in that younger group between 6 and 13, having opportunities for there to be more girls together. I was always kind of independent, so if I needed to go and practice and I was at the course by myself for 3 or 4 hours, I was totally fine. But my career was so much more fulfilling having other females that played golf that I could go hang with and chat with. We are so lucky in Southern California that we have a really strong women's division, and we have our own tournaments and match plays and committee. And some of my closest friends come from that PGA women's organization in SoCal.
Of which you kick everybody's ass. But I mean, hey, that's we'll just put that up to another first for you. So, all right. So you are a doctor, a phenomenal coach. All right, you're my buddy, and you don't do too bad at Christmas jingles. But the really cool thing here is you have young people tuning into this, and they want to be better players. What can you give me three Alison Curdt secrets that are like imperative if they want to play golf at a successful tournament level?
Definitely. Number one is get familiar with mindfulness and make it your friend as quickly as possible and make it a part of your life forever. If you can understand the tenets of mindfulness, practice it, and use it, you'll be able to overcome any situation that comes your way. Number two is to really have a growth mindset. So if you don't have a growth mindset, you have a fixed mindset right now, then you really need to get a mentor in your life to help you identify a growth mindset, because that's always going to help you look forward rather than backwards, take on challenges and look at them as opportunities. And then number three, be a smart practicer. Don't waste your time. We all have, quote unquote, such busy lives. So don't waste your time practicing stuff that is not actually going to help you progress. be very wise in your practice.
Well, you know what? Actually, you've given me, I have asked that question a couple times, and those are three new answers, which are really cool. Really cool. The
Good.
mindfulness is a really awesome one. I have a good friend of mine, Greg, who's a yoga instructor who conducts a mindfulness. He's more into mindfulness coaching than he is almost into yoga coaching. And I had him come in a couple of years ago and talk to the kids. And it's such an amazing, empowering thing to have if you know how to do that. So that wonderful point that you brought up. The really interesting thing is, it's not the quantity of practice, it's the quality, right? And we often
Right.
hear that. And it's really, I think, a very good point that if you know what you're really good at, right? And those things are really, your staples. You don't sit there and just beat that staple to death. Like, go find the little things that need to be finer tuned, because invariably what happens, right? You'll see this in students that we coach. They never practice their putting. They may own 7 different putters. We say to them, "Hey, I want to go. Yeah, let's go take a look at your putting." "Oh, my putting's fine. I slice it off. I slice it off the planet, so I need help with that." Well, no, but if we actually fixed you, but you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with your putter, right? But that's why you have 7, right?
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
it's so crazy, right? Because I mean, I think this is really an interesting point, because you brought up some really cool mindful stuff, and but again, the practice seems to be really, really the one thing that I think people can get so much better at. And do you find that people don't plan their practice?
Oh, nobody does. It's like so random. They pull out a golf club or they start from short and go to long, and then they think
Yeah.
that that's over, that's practice, or if I hit 30 minutes, I'm done. Like there's no plan. And I ask people, I'm like, do you go to the gym and work out? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you go into the gym that way too? And you're like, today I think I'll do the treadmill and then some biceps. And they're like, well, sometimes. And I'm like, well, now we've got a huge problem. Do you organize your life that way too? But other times, like when you go into the gym, you have a plan that you're going to follow. You know how many sets, how many reps, you know exactly the exercises that you're going to do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you rotate it around. Why aren't we doing that with our practice? And part of my job is to help teach my students what that is. It's not, I don't think it's inspiring when I have a junior who's like, yeah, I practiced for 5 hours on Saturday. And I'm like, well, how much of that 5 hours was wasted time on your phone, changing music, texting friends back, um, just messing around? How about having 90 minutes of like really concentrated practice and then go spend those other 3 hours hanging out with your friends and having a fun time? I
Right.
would say having a plan and just being more engaged in that moment with what you're doing, that's going to be the best use of time.
You know what? That is absolutely perfect. I mean, I've seen it on both sides. The kids that are the separators, the differentiators, are the ones that make that 90-minute plan and they execute it really well. And then they're out and they're going to go do stuff. And, the ones that hang out at the club and just, oh, let's go do this or let's go do that. And it's like, I'm going to beat golf balls for 2 hours. Yeah, okay. What are you working on? Well, I'm just working on trying to hit shots. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so frustrating, right? It's like banging your head against a locker or something like that. All right, so one final question, and it's kind of like I need you to think that you're going to peer into a bit of a crystal ball. All right, but I mean, you've done so much amazing things, right? But what does the future instill? What's the future look like for Alison Curdt, and where do you think she's going to be in like 10 years?
Well, what I hope to be in 10 years, certainly have more of the stuff that's up here published and accessible for other people. So that means putting my thoughts down in a book, getting it published, and having it out there in terms of the mental game. Um, I think that when we hear of top instructors, and this is actually something that's been kind of disappointing me a little bit the past couple of weeks, is um, all of these IGTV talks and webinars people are doing, and they've grabbed all the best instructors from across the country, and sometimes even across the globe. And I don't see any women. I might see one or two.
Right.
Doug, you're the only one that's having a bunch of women on your COVID chats, which I think is awesome, and I was so excited to be a part of it. In 10 years, I want to be that name. I want to be that person that when they're looking for the top instructors around the world, my name is part of that mix. And then I want in 20 years there to be so many more names a part of that mix so that women are looked at in terms of being top instructors. There's so many great instructors out there already that are just under the radar and they don't get the recognition that
Agreed.
that they could be. And so that's what I would see in the next 10 years.
Buddy, listen, you know what? You have accomplished so much in a short period of time. If you're peering into this crystal ball and you're saying this, I know it's gonna happen. And you know what? I can't tell you how much I appreciate your words. There is an absolutely a method to my madness here, and why I have you and Carrie and Lindsay and Michelle. It's because we're all on the same team, and you guys are freaking rock stars, and people need to understand this.
Mm-hmm.
I admire you so much for everything that you've accomplished, and our friendship, and just the ability to come in and open your heart and your mind to let everybody know just how awesome you are. And it's I mean, it's kind of a little goosebumpy for me, because it's really kind of cool that social media has born this friendship, and it's kind of cool because we're on the opposite sides of the continent, and we're having this live chat where everybody gets to meet you. So everybody, follow this woman, Alison Curdt Golf. All right, go look her up online. If you actually want, you should actually reach out to her if you want to help with any of that traumatic stuff to get by when we get out of purgatory and we get back on the golf course. She's your girl to help you. So listen, buddy, I can't thank you enough. And I really, really do wish you nothing but the very best and a continued success.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being on here with you. Enjoy our friendship as well. You're a great supporter. I love everything that you're doing in golf with juniors. I love your presence. Thanks for supporting women. I'm so appreciative of you.
You know what? Big hugs to you, kiddo.
You
Have
too.
a wonderful day. Enjoy the sunshine and hot temperatures in Cal.
I will.